Well, good evening and welcome back to another one of our Connecting Neighbors interviews. And tonight I am interviewing Falene Hough. Falene, there she is.
Hi.
So we're going to talk today about Falene and her two autistic boys. But let's start first with a little bit of background history here. When did you move to the Valley and why?
My husband and I, we moved back in 2010. I had just finished up with dental hygiene school down in Texas, and we were looking for somewhere that was close to, our parents and family members. And, humidity in Texas is not awesome, but we just wanted a place to kind of settle down with our family. And we had just gotten our son's diagnosis of autism. He was 2 years old. And my sister, who was already here in the Valley, was telling us about a preschool program specifically for kids with autism. And it was up through USU. And so that was something that also piqued our interest about moving to Cache Valley specifically.
Okay. What is the name of the program up there?
It's the ASSERT program. It's something like autism service and something in research and training. So they do a lot of different autism services, and they do a lot of autism research, and they do a lot of training of parents and children and other educators across the country even.
At the time you moved here, did you just have one son with autism or did you have your second son yet with autism?
So both Aiden and Gavin were born when we moved to the Valley.
Okay.
We had just received Aiden's diagnosis, and he was just over 2. And then Gavin was just over 1. They're only 13 months apart. So we only had one who'd been diagnosed at that point.
Was that a surprise to you that you got that diagnosis?
Yes and no. I knew something was different with him because he was 2 and he had 0 words, 0. So he wasn't talking at all. He made noises. We'd gone through and gotten his hearing checked and, checked to see if there were other things. But so it wasn't really a surprise, but at the same time, I didn't really know what autism was either. He says, okay, well, we've gotten the blood work back and there's not necessarily a genetic component to this. Your son has autism. And I'm like, okay, what do you do for that? And he goes, well, you want to try and get him involved in a pretty intensive speech program, at least 2 or 3 days a week, get him into a preschool. And I'm going, well, he doesn't talk yet. So speech, that makes sense, and I'm going, well, okay. In preschool, most kids his age go to preschool. So nothing really, like, I had no idea what it meant to get an autism diagnosis because, to me, kids with autism were kids who sat in a corner banging their heads on the wall and screaming and flapping their hands. And that's all it was, I had no idea how big of a spectrum it is and how much it can affect different people in different ways.
So before this, you hadn't really been familiar with autism at all, correct?
No, I mean, I'd heard of the word, but I had never really known anybody with it or understood what it was, or, even Asperger's syndrome, I'd kind of heard that word floated around. Like, there's just a lot of different things that I wasn't, but I didn't know anything about it really.
So you're in the thick of this now with finding out that your sons have been diagnosed.
Yeah.
How did that affect your extended family? Did they get it?
Our nephew had actually been diagnosed with autism earlier, but it was like a very mild form. So they already had one grandchild who'd kind of been through it already. But we weren't quite sure what was going on. And so my husband's parents had been exposed to it already. And my parents, my mom was getting her degree in marriage and family therapy and was studying a lot of psychology and had to understand about diagnosis of mental health disorders and things like that. So she, on paper, had been very exposed to what autism is and reading about it. She helped at a special needs preschool. But I feel like there's a big disconnect between Sometimes reading about and seeing things and then applying it to a loved one. There's kind of some denial that kicks in and
Sure.
how it can end up actually affecting your life.
You had mentioned that he's a very, very intelligent boy, or both boys are.
Yeah.
But you, what were the signs? What kind of proof did you have um, that told you, yes, this kid is a smart kid?
We got this train system when Aiden was about, a year and a half old. And so you had to actually match the polarity up correctly in order to get the train cars to actually connect to each other. It's not like you could just take any magnet and snick it, get it to stick together. So I showed him at 18 months old, Aiden, look. And I showed him, look, this doesn't work. But then I flipped it over. This does work. And I walked him through maybe 2 or 3 train cars. And from then on, I never had to show him again how to match up the polarity. And I think there was like 15 different cars that came with the train set. And so he would sit there at 18 months old and focus and connect all 15 different train cars together. And he'd patiently match up the polarity. Once he became verbal, he got really good at trapping me with logical fallacies. Because we went to this train park while we were visiting my parents one time down in California, and there was a little train that went around. So Aiden's like, I really want to ride the train. I really want to ride the train. And I'm like, sorry, bud, I didn't bring my purse with me. And it costs money to ride the train. So we're not going to worry about it today. So a couple of days later, we were going to the zoo, which was close by this train park. And Aiden says to me, Mom, do you have your purse? And I was like, yeah, I've got my purse. Why? And he goes, do you have money in your purse?
And how
Yeah,
old was he?
I do. I have money in my purse. Why are you asking me this? He says, good. Now you can take me to ride the train over there. Can we please stop?
How old was he then?
So he was probably right around 6.
Your other son,
Gavin.
Gavin,
Mhm.
was he nonverbal as well?
He had a speech delay, but by the time he was 2.5, he was stringing 2 and 3 words together. So for a 2.5-year-old, that was probably 6 months to a year behind. But I'm like, oh, look, he's talking. Aiden never talks. So look, he must be fine. And it was actually funny because we were doing the up to 3 program with him as well. And they do services for kids 3 years old and younger. But they came over initially to start working with Aiden, and they noticed that Gavin had some of these deficiencies. So they said, hey, let's get Gavin involved in this as well. And I'm like, great, this is going well. Let's help Gavin too. And we'd been doing the up to 3 program with Gavin for about 6 months when one of the therapists said to me, have you ever thought about Gavin having autism? It was the only time in my life I felt like somebody threw a bucket of cold water on me. But as soon as I had that sinking feeling and like this cold come over me, I immediately felt this like inspiration, like, oh my gosh, how did I not see this? That's what's going on. Oh my gosh, how did I not know? So, he had, his wasn't as severe, but at the same time, there were certain things about him that were so much harder to deal with than Aiden was. His sensory problems and his anxiety issues were they manifested early and they were so much harder to deal with. So, because Aiden, he is a pretty chill kid. He doesn't, oh
So
yeah.
how old were the boys when you started to integrate them into the mainstream education?
So my kids were doing the ASSERT program and they were doing the program through the school district as well. The preschool program through the school district isn't necessarily mainstream either, because they usually have 2 or 3 peer models in each class. But for the most part, it's kids who need to be there because they have some sort of disability or developmental delay or something. And so realistically speaking, with mainstream, they didn't get involved with that until we started at Thomas Edison. That's when they really got introduced to a mainstream classroom.
You had mentioned too that sometimes you would do practice things. for the kids to
Yes.
be able to function better in public. What were some of your practice things?
Um, so our most common one was going to the store. So, when you don't necessarily think about it, but when you go to Walmart, there's a lot of sounds and smells and visual things to see. There's just a lot going on. There's beeping registers, there's squeaky wheels on carts, there's lots of smells from the people in there and perfumes, and not to mention like the groceries and the clothes, and you go past the automotive section and you smell all the oils. There's a lot when you go to the store, when you start looking at it from a sensory perspective. And so if we had a Saturday afternoon that we weren't really necessarily doing anything, we would practice going to the store and how you have to stay next to mom and dad. You have to hold on to the cart. You have to stay here, and not run away. And you're not going to get everything that you want at the store. And if he has a meltdown, then we can just turn around and leave. So we had to practice doing it.
When you would be in public or in a store and one of the boys would have a meltdown, how did people react to you?
I have been lucky because I haven't had some of the same experiences that my friends who also have kids with autism have. I attend a support group here in town once a month, and so I talk to other parents of kids with autism. And some of the stories that come out from how people in the community react when their kids are having meltdowns are just heartbreaking. There was one time I was dealing with a meltdown, and I had this guy come over with his shopping cart, and he says, I'm waiting for him to say something mean. I'm just waiting for it. Like, please say something rude to me so I can vent on you and not my kid. But he's just like, don't worry, it happens to all of us. It'll be okay. And then he walked on. Like, I've actually had really pleasant experiences. The only time I've had somebody say something to me is when I was actually at the store with my youngest son. He's 5 right now. And this happened a couple years ago, and he was screaming because I wouldn't get him something. And I was trying to hurry so I could get done at the store. But this older lady was just like, shh, stop that. She was trying to shush him. And I'm just like, I didn't necessarily catch it because I was zooming past her, because I was trying to get out of the store to stop annoying everybody. But I realized, like, she just shushed my kid. And I'm just like, yeah, I get he's annoying. I'm working on it. But do you really think you as a random stranger yelling at him is going to fix it? The only time I've had somebody say something to me about my kids throwing meltdown was with my neurotypical child. And not the kids with autism. So yeah.
I know you mentioned to me too that there's actually cards that sometimes
yes,
parents will carry. I think that's a good idea. Tell us what that's about.
We have little 3x5 cards that you can print out, and it has a short explanation on it that says, my child has autism. We're dealing with a meltdown. Please let us keep working on this. And so that way, if your kid is having a meltdown and somebody wants to come over, either out of concern or because they're irritated, you can just turn around and hand them the card and continue working through the behavior with your kid.
How about for yourself? We've talked about the boys. What about for you? What do you do to get through day by day by day?
When you're dealing with disability and you're a caregiver, it just gets even more draining. So you have to be able to enjoy things that you like to do. So if it means that you let your kids have an extra screen time so you can read your book for a little bit, that's where you kind of have to overcome that mom guilt. Like, if I can let them play on the screen for an hour so I can take a shower or read my book or something like that, do something to take care of myself each day, then I need to just not feel like I'm a bad mom because I let them have more screen time. Having something to look forward to that's not to deal with the kids For me, going to support group once a month, I really look forward to it because it's just a lot of fun. And when you can be around people who just get it, they laugh at your jokes at the right time because they know exactly how it is because they've been there before. I do work. Part of it is because it's something I do for me, and dental hygiene is I'm a dental hygienist. For maybe 4 years, I just worked 1 day a week. That's it. I would have that 1 day a week that I could go and be Falene and utilize all of my other skills and talents and not have autism be my entire world.
What advice could you give to a parent who maybe suspects that their child has autism, or what can you tell them to get ahead of it, or at least to try to get on it soon enough, early?
So the earlier the better. If you're suspicious, so I tell people go online to Google and put in DSM-5 autism diagnosis. And then there's 3 different categories that your child has to show markers in each of those 3 categories in order to qualify for a diagnosis. But that tells you what professionals are looking for. Pediatricians are amazing, but they see the general public, they deal with a lot of things. Autism may or may not be their specialty. I mean, when we started with the up to 3 program in Texas, I was like, yeah, he's really not making eye contact. And she's like, you know what? Sometimes we don't realize how little eye contact we make with our kids. She didn't know anything. She to say, oh, your child's lack of eye contact, don't worry about it. Like when that is a hallmark thing for autism.
And
And
I
so,
would think that when somebody tells you that and you look at them as being a professional of
yep,
sorts, that, okay, then I guess I really don't have to worry about this. And there's
exactly.
also, I'm sure there's a denial with parents.
Yes. Yep.
So it isn't a good thing to deny it. It is good to go ahead and be proactive on it and see. Maybe it'll turn out, maybe it isn't, but then at least
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing. So that's why I say, look up what the DSM-5 says are the criteria for it. And if you have that little, like, yeah, they do that a lot, um, tell your pediatrician, my child's not doing X, Y, and Z. Then say, I'm concerned there may be autism involved, and I've heard that early intervention is best. 18 months old, that's kind of the standard for getting diagnosed at this point. And if they really don't do anything different for an 18-month-old or an 18-year-old with diagnosis. They actually will go back, and when they're trying to diagnose an 18-year-old, they'll say, what were you like when you were 2 and 3? Like that is the critical point. But they really start to taper off once you get older than 5, 6, like it gets harder. And so, the earlier you can get a diagnosis, and it makes a difference to have that diagnosis paper in your hands, the better.
To wrap this up,
Yeah.
what can we do as a community to be better understanding and be better, more supportive of people that do have children with autism? What,
I
other than to think that you have a really bratty kid?
since going through this ourselves, I've obviously had a big mindset change. The thing that I would just say is just remember, you never know what's going on with that family. Maybe they just got some really bad news, and like the kid is just upset because there's too many things going on and it's not even autism, like, or the kid just found out that their parents are getting divorced and they're acting out because of things like that. And if it's somebody who does have autism, like, what are you going to gain by saying something mean? And so why make it harder? Aiden loves wearing autism shirts, and I got him a new one this year because at Walmart they usually have them. in April. And this new shirt that I got him, I really like it. It says, "In a world where you can be anything, be kind." To have that guy who just walked by, mostly didn't say anything to me, and just said, "Hey, we've all been there. Good luck. You'll make it." And then just kept going on with his day. Like, that just changed my whole perspective about people.
And it made your day.
And it made me feel a lot less bad about what was going on.
Thank you so much for giving us
Absolutely.
some insight to autistic children and parents of autistic children.
Absolutely.
We really
Anytime.
appreciate that. And I'll be seeing you at the dentist office.